We all know the great legend of King Arthur, this benevolent, warlike king who ruled with his council, the Round Table in Camelot. They were seeking for the Holy Grail, and they were fighting evil and promoting justice. They were the true knights, and the legend of King Arthur meant that he was a great king that people respected and wanted. What's so interesting is that obviously a legend that played a huge part in the English society, in English traditions, in English cultures, but not just in English cultures, even in French cultures. We have this show Camelot that is quite my favorite show. It's a comedy show, but it is so funny and hilarious, and it tells the story of the legend of King Arthur. We also know that the legend of King Arthur actually stems from Wales and their own myth and legend. So here we have almost a clash of culture between Celtic culture and Norman culture, the English culture. So here it's very interesting to see actually what is the story, or should I say the stories behind the myth, and why is it so important that we discuss it, and what kind of problem King Arthur has created. That's why I call this kind of, video myth versus history, because it is very important to understand that a legend can be so important and revealing about our own customs, our own traditions, and therefore our own history and culture. The truth is, there is, little that we actually know about who was the real King Arthur. We don't even know if he actually existed. There's a huge debate among scholars and historians, and most people said that he actually didn't exist at all. And this is where you see as well the power, what the hell? The power of that kind of, legend, that power of a kind of tradition, the power of the myth that we build in our imagination. Why do we do that? We do that to be able to live together, we do that to be able to rule, but sometimes we do that as well to be able to defend a territory, to defend some legitimacy. And that's why it's so interesting to see how the legend of King Arthur influenced the medieval ages in England and in Wales. There are different books that discuss the legend of King Arthur. There are the Welsh Annals, there are the Historia Brittonum, and many people have written about him. The fact that he was the son of Pendragon and that he was advised by the wizard Merlin. He fought monsters, he fought dragons. There's this kind of power around him. And the fact that he was such a good king because he had a round table, he had knights around him, he was seeking the Holy Grail, he was doing great things, and he was also really much, caring about the people. And I think here it's almost like the myth and the legend of King Arthur is, what kind of king do you want? And that obviously is going to put lots of pressure on the actual kings or lords or overlords that were existing in medieval ages. And that's going to create frictions, and it's going to see when a legend can create problems for the actual and real historical kings. Details of Arthur's story are mainly composed of Welsh mythology, English folklore, literary invention. And most historians of the period do not think that he was a historical figure. We don't have anything to prove that he actually lived. Sites and places have been identified as Arthurian since the 12th century, but it is important to remember that it is also a legend that stems from the 6th and the 8th century, again really linked to Celtic culture. What is also so interesting is that almost King Arthur is a mix of different historical figures. Some historians and scholars think he was Lucius Artorius Castus, a Roman officer who served in Britain in the 2nd or 3rd century. Others are saying that he could have been a Welsh king. So here we have very also the kind of identification of him that is, almost intertwined with different historical figures. That is why it's probably just a legend. But because King Arthur being a legend doesn't mean that historically it is not important. The first narrative account of Arthur's life is Geoffrey of Monmouth's Historia Regnum Britannia. Here we have this work as an imaginative and fanciful account of British kings, from the legendary Trojan exile Brutus to the 7th century Welsh king Cadwallader. Geoffrey placed Arthur in the same post-Roman period. This kind of account serves as a mystery, serves as bringing the legend almost back to life. It is where people are saying maybe he existed. What's very disturbing is that with this account, Geoffrey of Monmouth ends this account with a glimpse of hope that Arthur didn't die when he was supposed to die in battle. And so we have this hope, we have people who are going to have this hope that King Arthur is a sort of, of a great king, of this legendary king who could come back to life and could unite again, in the British Isles, that could unite the tribes, and such a merciful, benevolent, but also this powerful and great king that could unite everyone. So that is why it is mostly a problem for kings who are trying as well to mark history. And here I'm thinking about Henry II of England, who was a true warrior king and who kept attacking Wales and who kept wanting Wales to bend the knee to him. And he's going to attack many tribes and he's going to fail, but at some point he's going to capture one of the Welsh princes, Prince Rhys, and he's going to take him back to England, forcing all the Welsh princes to show allegiance, bend the knee to him. When they're going to go back to Wales, they're going to go back into rebellion, and King Henry II is going to struggle to crush that rebellion. That happened at the moment when King Arthur's legend was almost at its climax, because people were really thinking and believing that he would come back and unite the Welsh and probably defeat King Henry II of England. So here in the 12th century, in the 13th century, in the 14th century, we have these kings that want to assert the power, and in doing so, they're going to do propaganda against Arthur, King Arthur. We see here that this mythology, that this legend of King Arthur really influenced the medieval ages, really influenced the people. We really have the sense of a time that needed, because of the chaos, because of uncertainty, because of the crusades that were, taking so much time. It's almost like people needed a savior. And Arthur, King Arthur, and the legend of King Arthur with Merlin, with being a bit, this sense of magic, really helped people believing in a better world, in a better outcome. But also, they wanted a better ruler. They wanted someone that they could trust. King Henry II used propaganda against King Arthur as a way to force the Welsh princes to bend the knee. He didn't want the Welsh kings and princes to have hope, and King Arthur was giving them hope of a better future and a better leader. To do so, Henry ordered research into the legend of Arthur. He wanted them to go into the details of what it actually was and where did it stem from. During his research, King Henry II of England allegedly found the burial place of Arthur. But when he went there was this tomb saying that Arthur was lying here with his second wife, Guinevere, though there's no record of a first wife, so that was a bit weird. And there's a legend that when they grabbed her hair, the golden hair that had been left there, the monks grabbed it and it disappeared from their hands. There was also a sword, the sword of King Arthur, Excalibur. And I think, in many ways, it plays even more in the myth and legend of King Arthur. We're not sure if they opened the tomb or not completely and see if there was any remainings, but I think it even played more in the role that King Henry II had to kind of understand this legend to be able to confront the Celtic culture and therefore the Welsh. The truth is, the legend of King Arthur is probably only a legend that stems from different stories of different great kings from different periods. But it helped the people and some princes and rulers to kind of imagine a better way of ruling. And it forced King Henry II himself to discuss that, to engage with it, to engage with the legend, to engage of why so many people were resisting his rulership. And I think that what's fascinating with the legend of King Arthur is also all these different myths and all these different cultures and traditions into it. Obviously Celtic, as I said, but you know, there's also this idea of Holy Grail, there's this legendary Excalibur sword, there's this magic Merlin, we have this account of giants and of monsters and of dragons. And I think it almost creates the ultimate heroic king of all time. And that is why it's so funny when the French, you know, who are not really part of that story, use that story because of the link with Brittany. And, you know, Brittany, you know, was linked to the Celtic culture even more. And how we try to understand that legend. And obviously, as I said, there's this great show that is quite very, very funny. But what's so interesting is that during the series, at first it's just funny, and then it becomes more about the legend, and it becomes darker, more serious, to take seriously the burden that it was for King Arthur to find the Holy Grail, but also like to disappoint his people. And I thought it gave him like kind of a more human side instead of the legend. And I found it really interesting how in popular culture we still talk about the legend of King Arthur. I really hope that you enjoy this What the Hell in History video, and that you learn a bit more about the history surrounding the legend and try to understand how a legend can really be intertwined with history itself. Thank you so much for watching. I'm so grateful for your support, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!